Hey, I'm Tyler.
And I'm K.C.
And you're listening to
The Element Podcast.
Hola, amigos, my woods people. We are in a truck again. I know it's something we do often. So there's rain and there's vehicle noise that potentially might enter the mics, but
windshield wipers.
You know, sometimes you just got to take advantage of a little time on the road, a little windshield time. So KC and I are actually heading back from a trip within state. Not out of state, but a within-state trip to take advantage of some of the cool, interesting, non-native things that exist here in Texas. And we got to do a little hanging in trees with our bows recently.
In those hanging moments, I was trying to decide what my favorite non-native in Texas is when it came to animals.
Yep.
And that's kind of a tough thing to think about.
Yeah, there's some good ones. I would venture to say you might be hard pressed to find a non-native that has had a better economical impact than the Florida strain largemouth bass.
Yeah, that's definitely overall you would say that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking in the furry kind, but the Florida largemouth is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
I would agree on that.
Yep, it's a fun one. There's some pretty cool. There's actually some really cool scientific project / research work that has been done since the 80s, I guess, involving Florida strain largemouths.
Are you referring to OWR? Operation World Record?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, anyway, that's kind of a different deal. But the non-natives of Texas are many. We actually saw something we didn't really know what it was. There's 2 trucks in the convoy right now, and I was in a truck different than KC earlier, and we went 2 different routes, but now we're back on the same path, and we saw something look like a water buck or a nilgai or something. There was a bunch of them out there. I almost wanted to think they were wildebeest, but I don't think they were quite big enough. But it was pretty interesting, something that was gray out there, and we were all like, what are those? Couldn't see them very good, but there's so many different things in Texas that could be hunted, and there's so many different ways of hunting. I actually came to find out about a way that people hunt, I guess you could call it hunting, that I never knew about this week. And this is what's cool. Texas is a big place. So, you could think about it as like when you travel a certain distance in Texas, in other places in the country, you're literally states away. So there's a different culture in Boston than there is in New York City, right? And it's similar. Here we have a ton of different cultures, but it's all kind of united under the Texas flag. And I think it's cool to go places, talk to interesting people, which we got to do, and hear some of the stories of the people that they run into. And here in Texas, we have one of the biggest economies in the world, just within our state, and it leads you to deal with a lot of different unique people who come from many different backgrounds of many different jobs and different social classes, and you run into some people that every once in a while that you're like, man, I don't know how we're sitting here talking together, because you run in different circles. You have boats, and you travel all the time, and you do these things, and me, I hadn't paid myself in 15 years, so it's kind of a wild thing, and I there's just so many ways to hunt things, or whatever you might. I mean, it's not. Some people wouldn't call it hunting, right? Some of the things that can be done, and here in Texas, it's no secret. We have a lot of fences, and some of those fences are high, and down in
cost and in stature.
Yeah, that's right. down in the area that we spent some time this week. We actually did a lot of driving. We were doing what we ideally were wanting to do is we wanted to get a low fence or free range axis hunt and chase after these animals and kind of figure out what they're all about. See what they, see if they're different than whitetail and how much different. And, we wanted that free range aspect as much as possible. So we kind of were working on that in these areas, but there's tons of high fences around in different places. And, every year that goes on, especially with as productive as our economy has been the last 10 years or so, there's going to be more and more of these fences popping up. I don't know. I kind of thought about this a few times while I was down there, but what happens when most of the landscape becomes high fence? It's kind of a weird feeling.
Yeah, especially whenever it's smaller parcels. When I mean smaller, I mean less than 1,000 acres. That's a lot of land, but in the grand scheme of landscapes, it's a small area, and so you literally are introducing false boundaries to wildlife and have isolated populations that have their own population dynamics that are unique and pretty hard to maintain on a small property like that. It's not a great situation.
I mean, because at some point, it may be 200 years or whatever, but at some point, if wealthy people keep moving out of Austin and DFW and buying property and high fencing it, then at some point, there's more than there isn't that's high fence.
I think it'll socially regulate.
You think?
Mm-hmm. I think that there will be some ebb and flow to that sooner or later. I don't know.
What do you? I guess I'm not following fully. You think people will, some sort of maybe conservation ethic will?
Yeah, or just the lack of desire for the high fence thing.
I gotcha.
For instance, right now you can go to certain areas of Texas, sit in a tree, and maybe see one native big game species and 3 non-natives all in the same hunt. And if you have because the original thought behind at least exotic high fencing, not high fencing of whitetails and other native game, was that we're going to bring in something that you can't really find here and have a population of them to hunt because we like to hunt more cool things.
Yeah.
And
I think there was a lot of, especially with earlier things that were brought over, there's a lot of meat as well, the quality meat.
Yeah.
Game meat production was kind of part of the deal too.
I'm not going to really speak to the ethical side of that too much. Dude, morals and ethics are so subjective. There's absolute truth in the Bible, and everything besides that is just whatever you think, man.
That's right.
So, whatever you think on this high fence stuff, but we're just telling you it's like this, man.
Like this.
That was originally why they had high fence, axis, black buck, aoudad, things like that, was to just have variety in new and unique species. And it was kind of like grassroots efforts. Greg and I were talking about this. The YO, you know something about the YO too. The YO is one of the big exotics importers, along with the King Ranch and a couple others. Excuse me, still recovering from getting sick. And so, there was a necessity for a fence to keep those animals in because you didn't want them to disperse, and then you wouldn't have the animals anymore.
Yeah.
Well, now
and you spent money on them or whatever.
Yeah, it's to the case to where that actually is inverted in some cases. We saw this week. We actually drove around on a medium-sized high fence place, less than 1,000 acres, and it was devoid of game. And if you had cut the fences on this place and you'd be letting access in.
Yeah.
As opposed to,
you'd
it's
be
almost
giving access to access.
Yeah, you're almost keeping them out. So there's more low fence than there is high fence in that particular parcel, which kind of goes back to your point, but also to say that somewhat alleviates a need for the high fence whenever there's so many of the exotics running around free range.
Yeah.
So why fence them?
Do you think that? So one of the big optimistic or big pluses to that the YO would throw out there to why it's such a cool place is that there are herds of certain exotic species on the YO that replenish the suffering herds across the Atlantic Ocean or whatever, or across the Pacific. In other countries where those things are native, they're able to restock with those animals, or even just maybe they don't restock it, but just they know that there are they're not endangered, but what's the lighter term of that? Threatened species,
the scimitar horned oryx is a great example.
Yeah, and we've in America though they're established well or whatever.
Yeah, and Barbary sheep, also known as the aoudad, is another one, and black buck are all three things that at one point in their existence there were more in Texas than there were in their native ranges.
Yeah. Do you think that if the YO points that out, that's a side? That's just a side benefit to what they actually intended to do. You think they actually intended that to be the case? Were they thinking that far ahead?
I don't know. And here we get into the tricky game of who is they too, because I'm not trying to say that generations previous to us didn't have foresight, but they at the same time wouldn't know what was coming in the 21st century, just like we don't know what's coming in the 23rd century. So it's hard to say that, but I think that there was not malicious intent with the introduction of exotic species in this case. I think that it was hey, let's add some more things out there.
Yeah,
and I like that. I like more things. More things are cool.
Yeah,
especially whenever.
Well, it's a productive landscape.
Yeah, when they can coexist with natives and it work out okay, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
are they coexisting with natives well?
Well, that probably is something that would take more study than what I have time to do because I no longer am a wildlife professional, which is also subjective as to what you would call that. You know, newsflash: you don't have to work for a government entity to be a wildlife professional. But yeah, I don't know, man. I do think that. Texas is like a lot of clubs or whatever you want to call it. From the outside looking in, you can't make a lot of sense of it, but from the inside out, we can't really explain it, but we like it.
Yeah. Here's a quick little, just a brief thing on the YO. It's pretty cool. It was bought. Looks like the YO was purchased by Charles Schreiner in 1880 or so.
Yeah, I recognize
that name. A long time ago. In the early 50s, the curator of the San Antonio Zoo, Fred Stark, had a surplus of animals and suggested that Charles Schreiner of the YO Ranch take some of them to see how they would adapt. As soon as 1953, black buck, antelope, sika deer, or sika as we usually call them, fallow deer, aoudad were introduced to the wilderness of the YO. They successfully acclimated to the terrain and were soon followed by axis deer. The motive for the acquisition was to breed the animals for conservation purposes.
There you go. Pretty cool.
The effort was so successful that within a short time, animals were being sold to zoos, while others were being sent back to their native lands to replenish dwindling herds. So,
cite your source there. Who is that?
That is the YORanch.com, pretty much.
Cool.
YOShriner.com.
Yeah.
So,
which you can imagine they're putting a pretty positive spin on things.
Yeah,
but I don't blame them.
They can make their own story.
I've been to the YO. It's a cool place, man. It's very historic.
I wanted to go bad.
I went to an exotic sale there, which is pretty cool, man. You got to see. You think going to the zoo is cool? Go to an exotic sale. You get to see way more cool stuff.
That's cool, dude. I always so for me, I shot my first whitetail, my first deer at 9, first big game animal, 9 years old. And then it was not many more years after when I started hunting all the cheap sheep species that we have here in Texas, right?
Cheap sheep.
Cheap sheeps. I mean, probably 10, like 11, 12, 13, 14, I shot a couple of different sheep. And through that experience, like, this was back, when we had Windows 95 or whatever it was. It was just like the slowest moving internet slash operating system on planet Earth ever in the history. But I would get on the internet and just look up prices on some of these hunts, and back then you don't know what you're looking at or whatever, but like, I just know that I wanted to hunt. Like I had the way I ranked my species was black buck was the thing I wanted to hunt the most. Axis was the next thing close behind, and then fallow. Those were like my top 3 species, and I always was looking into like how could I save up enough money to go shoot an axis or a black buck, and like fairly good sized black buck. I think back then were like $1,200 or something,
Yeah,
and I was
it's
like,
gonna be a lot more than that now.
Yeah. And I was like, man, I can get there, And I just never, man. Saving that much money back then was just tough. I could have gotten there probably, but just as a kid, man, you just don't want to work your life away, Yeah. So ended up just never getting to that point, getting into high school football, and you kind of, about near have to chill the hunting for a while when you're in high school football. And then college. And then, of course, we had the boom of of 2000, the mid-2010s that probably increased those prices quite a bit, especially then. I mean, I know just overall inflation. And now you're looking at like, what would a black buck, like a good size but not like a monster black buck cost you probably?
When I was
average
doing exotic work, it's about $100 an inch. And I bet you it's more than that now. So bet you a 20-incher is going to cost you $3,000 to $3,500. I bet right now. I mean, I'm just kind of.
Which it looks like we were looking before we came down here, like what axis cost, because.
So when we talk about cost, this is like to go on a hunt that's kind of guaranteed, most likely high fence. Is what you're looking at here. There are still some like trophy fee, like free range hunts for this stuff too, but that's. It's kind of like weird, right? And I don't really want to do the high fence thing where you're kind of halfway guaranteed the animal, but like I understand the economic value at least that we're talking about.
Yeah. The axis, it seemed like on a quick search for 15, 20 minutes was like a lot of them were going from about $3,250 to like over $5,000. And I would imagine black buck sit in that range pretty similar too. Toad black buck out in the middle, just hanging out. They're real grassland oriented. So like you see them in the open stuff, and that's why I think free range black buck is so much probably harder to find, because they just don't. They're a grassland animal, whereas an axis can get into brush a little more. Not that they're a whitetail, but
So there's like 3. I don't know what you call them, like standard exotics. So there's super exotics and there's regular exotics. Okay, so like the 4 regular exotics in Texas are going to be axis, black buck, fallow, and aoudad. Those are going to be kind of your standards.
There's a below category too.
Yeah, there is.
All the
sheep
sheeps
and stuff.
or different sheep.
Which some of those are pretty cool too.
They are.
Like red sheep.
Mouflon, like a true
Urials. Those things are a little bit higher up there too. But like Tyler's talking about, like Spanish goats and
black Hawaiian, Texas doll,
and what's the Corsicans and what's the hybrid. It's like a boar goat hybrid with what are they called? Like the stuff that are on the ibex. That's one thing. So ibex hybrids. You run into some of those, which is just
weird.
Literally a goat. Anyways, so of those standard exotics, they all kind of do different stuff. And I think the reason that, like when I used to work in the exotics industry, fallow were treated a little differently, and black buck to an extent were as well. Whereas axis and aoudad brought a pretty nice premium because they are the wildest. So axis and aoudad don't really ever domesticate or tolerate humans too much.
Yeah.
Whereas black buck, to an extent, will just kind of live in a small enclosure.
Oh, yeah.
They still don't want to be petted.
You saw that toad right up next to that little house or whatever. Yeah.
Dude, fallow deer will turn into pets.
Weird.
They're weird. They're very docile. So it's strange to just kind of think about like the differences in some of these critters. You know, like the fallows just didn't really. It seemed like there wasn't as much demand for them back then.
Are they more docile because they come from a place where they live close to people?
I don't
know. Like the country they come from, or the countries they come from, are like pretty populated, right, with people.
It's just like northeastern Europe, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what that is. I think some things just have a different nature about them. You know, who knows? Like bison. You know, bison, not really docile, but tolerant of humans because. What are you going to do to it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Just a big old sucker.
yeah. He's like, okay, come on. So anyways, I kind of sidetracked you there on something you were saying.
No, I think you were talking about kind of like the super exotics versus the regular exotics.
The point was of those four kind of standard exotics, we were after like one of the more wily ones that I can remember even in the business too.
Yeah.
And
what are name a few super exotics for those who don't know what that means?
The standard super exotic would be the oryx or the gemsbuck, as a lot of people would know it. A scimitar horned oryx, which is a oryx that has kind of a reddish nape on it and a white belly, and has like kind of floppy horns. Is not quite as fancy, but you can think of like the big gray ones that look like the size of the horse, the ones that you hunt in New Mexico, they call them oryx on there, but gemsbuck is kind of the standard name for them. Those are the kind of the going super exotic. And then after that in Texas, you'll have wildebeest, I would call most likely a super exotic. There's
kudu.
There's not a ton of kudu in Texas, but there are some.
We saw one.
Did you?
Yeah, you saw it too.
At that little petting zoo thing?
Yeah. But there's also like Addix is one I've seen a lot of.
Is a unique animal. It's a spiral horned but bumpy horned antelope. They're pretty cool. What else is out there? It's in the supers that I've seen often. I would say like there's weird things like red lechwe is kind of in between. It's more
any of those
rarity.
African antelope can be one of those things offered.
There's Thompson's gazelles in Texas I've seen. There's all kinds of stuff out there running around.
So let's take let's just say maybe the lowest, or I don't mean this in a bad way, but the lowest type of hunting, as in more like the lowest economical or whatever, the most economical, the most affordable and common type of hunting maybe is either locally as a resident of a state, hunting on a property that you get permission on, or a big public piece of property or something like that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The most approachable.
Yeah, that's the most like approachable thing. And then you've got these different levels in between, right? So you've got like cheap lease, and then you've got like a pretty average lease, and you got like a place where like if you're on that lease, you're spending some money and you're probably going to be able to shoot a big deer. And then you got like a place where maybe a hunting club on the Mississippi River where like you might have to have somebody die before you can actually get on that place, right? And then there's many more levels that I'm not super familiar with, but high fence would be up in there in this other category of like you're spending a lot of money. You maybe even like some of these places down here, maybe even like bring your wife and it's a wine and dine thing along with like quote unquote hunt. And then this may be, you may go from like big high fence places, like some of the places in Texas that are high fence are legit 20,000 acre high fence. So I mean, pretty dadgum near wild, as wild as it gets. Like there are deer living in the middle of that thing that haven't seen the fence. So then you can go all the way down to like legit pin hunting, pretty much, to where it's just guaranteed. You can shoot across the pin, and then I found out about a new one that I didn't know this week. But there's this version of like corporate buying, like bidding on animals.
Yeah, I remember I was talking about this. When you said that earlier, I was like, what is he talking about, the new thing? But yeah, that's like, it's almost like they're taking the middleman out.
Yeah.
That's a very weird deal.
It's like, to me, I think maybe the most, like, far from that first step that we talked about, the most approachable hunting, is like probably the video game style of hunting or whatever, where you can like shoot something but not actually be there.
Yeah.
Through like a internet robotic gun or whatever. And this sits somewhere probably under that, where like the corporations are bidding on animals, and the high bid like sends whoever they bid on it for, or whoever wants to, down to shoot that animal, and it's pretty much guaranteed.
You like have a menu.
Yeah.
And you pick the thing on the menu, and it's like, okay, I'm going to go kill Kickers. Kickers is a 326-inch SCI buck.
Yeah.
And you go down there and, and 3 days and 2 nights you sit in a stand waiting on Kickers to come
It's
by.
interesting. If this makes you, I'm not into like just hating on a bunch of stuff right now. So, if this makes you feel weird inside, I understand.
Yeah.
But I'm just throwing out, like, these are the levels of hunting.
Someone's
the differences,
speaking
right?
objectively about some things here.
Yeah. I'm just saying there's a difference in what you can do with a lot of money in hunting slash, like I said, quotations maybe, and then what you can do with not very much money in hunting. And it all exists in Texas.
Yep.
I mean, literally the opposite ends of the spectrum exist in Texas, right? So,
except for the really big places of public land. Well, no, there are some.
Yeah,
there are some.
Sam,
they're not very great.
No, they're not. But it all exists here, and so we have a cool state, man.
Yeah,
we have a state that has like a lot of different things that you can do, a lot of things you can chase, a lot of ways you can chase them, and then we have like a huge just historical culture that's been around a long time, involved around hunting in Texas. So I don't know. It's something that I've been glad to grow up and experience. I mean, as much as maybe some people don't like the high fence thing, I'm glad that I've gotten to know it and know what it is. And I don't know. I can't tell you the last time I hunted a high fence place. It probably was when I was about 14, when I was shooting those sheep, but to know them, to see them, to kind of figure out if there's good and if there's bad. Some of these places, we talked about this a little bit, but some of these places are legit. There's obviously species that can get out of that pen. So like birds, pollinators, some of these things. And some of these places are owned by people who don't need money, and they're managed accordingly. So maybe no cattle. And your native grasses and wildflowers in those areas are, awesome. It feeds lots of birds and turkeys, and, the turkeys aren't penned in by any means. And, all this there are benefits. And private land conservation, would you say, is more important than public land conservation?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Y'all probably heard me talk about that a little bit, and it probably makes some people get real weird. But, I mean, look at the broad landscape of the U.S.
Yeah.
Even your most public land heavy western states, like say like a Nevada or something like that, still has a decent amount of private ground. And you take a state like Texas, shoot, man, 97% of the ground in Texas is going to be privately owned in some sense of the matter. So, yeah, if you want Texas native wildlife to exist, private land conservation is going to be key.
And so with that, we ended up hunting a couple of different free range or low fence properties on this trip, and one of them especially that we spent the most time on is actually a really cool property where the landowner is wanting native stuff to thrive. And so we got to see some cool native grasses. We got to see a bunch of whitetails. And this is happening on private property.
Yeah, this place is the opposite of high fence. It's no fence.
Yeah.
There's not even a 3-wire.
Yeah, there's no cattle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're trying to turn this thing back into a very native property. And if I'm being frank, it won't happen because you can't, like I said, unless you have the fence, you can't keep the axis off of it. You know what I mean? You can't keep the hogs off of it. There's going to be hogs, right? but they want to see it as close to as it was as possible. So they, have, they try to take some hogs off of it or whatever. And so, I don't know, it's just cool, man. It's like, it's different than you think of. Like you may hear on a lot of podcasts, even within our own network here, about these, state and maybe even federal biologists that are working on public lands to do, good things. But, in Texas, it's just different. And we're from Texas, and we think about it a little different. And we look at all this private land as there's some cool things that can be done. There's some experiments that have gone bad, I don't know what the King Ranch, how they exactly feel about their Nilgai. They're making some money off of them. But,
Katy blue stem, dude. It's invasive. It's a King Ranch hybrid blue stem that is like, non-native everywhere.
Yeah.
It's kind of spread, right? And love grass, same kind of thing. Like, there's things that go bad, but there's things that go bad on plenty of public ground too.
Yeah, but I mean, you also, you may trim the tree too much in your own yard and kill it. You know, I mean, we're out here trying to do what we can do and make things better, and sometimes it doesn't always go right.
Depends on how you believe. We believe in the humanity's dominion over the animal kingdom of the world that we have here, and dominion does not mean to dominate, but dominion means to preside over. And part of that presiding is the management of. And I think it's really cool to see people like the folks that we were blessed to get to hunt their property this week to make personal efforts towards that kind of stuff. They kind of have a personal conservation ethic about how they'd like to see things done and understand, like, the lady is a vegetarian. And I don't know the context of her vegetarianism, but she understood the necessity of hunting and was like, not squeamish at all about us hunting things.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of cool. She understands it's a thing. Maybe not for her, but it is a thing that's out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think that that gift and that dominion that we have is the ability to try to make things better. Right. And, try would kind of be the key word, right? Like, we're really not able to fully do everything we want just because we're working with nature's elements and nature's or natural things. And so you try, you learn. Maybe when you're 70, your tomato garden doesn't ever fail, but until then it might, I mean, these people right here tried to have dominion over that cow, and now it's in the ditch. You know what I mean?
It's in the ditch, grazing right beside the road.
Yeah.
Not good.
So, in about an hour, that's going to be a real dangerous hazard.
Yep.
But, I think that's a cool thing. And, like, it doesn't say that you should have everything fixed and everything perfect and have the best, citrus and the best, tomato garden or whatever, but like that we should try, and that's what part
Take care
of. That's how we're able to glorify through our lives here on earth, and so it's pretty cool. It's a cool process to be a part of, man. And anyway, with all that, I think we, can talk a little more about actually the hunt, and to me, it started with these people that have grown up around this property and having them tell us a little bit about it, going out there and just really, like, I don't know, it's cool when you hunt somebody who respects the property and the wildlife as much as they do. When you hunt on their property, it just, like, I don't know, it brings like a new appreciation for what you're doing. Like, we're not just here to kill a deer. Like, we are, but we also are here to, like, hunt a property that is, like, special.
Yeah.
And that is cool. And to do something that I literally have wanted to do since I didn't even know that I was, that I might be hunting a high fence ranch if I bought a black buck hunt. You know what I mean? So, like, just for so long I wanted to do this. And it's just like a cool thing that I would catch myself almost like out of body experience, almost like I'm looking at myself in the tree thinking, I can't believe you're actually here finally. You're actually here in Texas hunting for axis deer, free range, something you've wanted to do for 20 years or whatever, So it was a pretty cool deal. We started out, and we actually bought some alfalfa hay.
That's right.
To do some stuff.
Just a little
with.
axis baiting, you know? Yeah. So I have exotic experience with the game capture world, and also last year, Chris Webb and I came down here and hunted a different place and found out that, like, alfalfa bales really do it for the old axis deer. Especially in the winter months whenever things are a little bit sparse, especially during the drought like we got right now. Them suckers will hammer that alfalfa bale.
Yeah.
And the whitetail will too, apparently. Figured that out
they
as well.
they did some hammering for sure. That's mostly what I saw at the bale. So, you know, also another thing, we may not have fully introduced the axis like we should, but it's a Indian, Sri Lankan, you know, species that is it's about the same size as like probably average whitetail.
I'd say like a Midwestern type deer.
Yeah.
Like a big, we started calling them bulls because I feel like buck is kind of weird for them.
Yeah.
But like, I think they could probably push the 300 mark, some of the biggest ones, you know. But, I mean, there's probably a stat on there to tell you what they are. But they are stockier built than your average Texas
They're kind of short-legged looking. Yeah. Look kind of like a lab that's been overfed a little bit. But they're bigger than the whitetail. Yeah. Because our whitetail are kind of small. Yeah. You know?
Scientific name axis, also known as a cheetal deer. If you look around in India, there's like a couple different varieties of the same thing, pretty much, but they're all considered axis. Standard has 3 points per side, and they have antlers. They lose their antlers, and they have spots their whole lives, and they vocalize.
Yeah, they have some cool vocalizations, like some deep guttural stuff.
Yeah, their antlers are built a lot like an elk.
Yeah,
but just 3 points.
Yep, that's right. They're very standard 3-pointers on each side, as a Westy would call them.
Yes.
But yeah, they were originally brought over. I think I looked this up and I saw where they were originally brought over in the 20s. I think
you just read about this a while ago. Right?
Well, no, I don't know if the YO was the first place to get them. Oh, I'm not sure. I don't know that actually. But they were brought over for game meat, from what I understand, as like a supplemental deal. So in other words, axis are a supreme meat.
They are tasty.
They are a tasty animal. Yeah. Which it's weird because some of the more common exotic species in Texas are also like tastier than whitetails. It's like maybe that's part of the reason why they were brought over here. It's like, you know what? These axis, these nilgai, these black bucks are pretty tasty. So maybe we should have some of them to hunt around
here.
These
pigs?
Pigs, yeah, that's right. That's right, man. Isn't that crazy?
I mean, you'd be, probably starting a pretty good debate on if a pig was tastier than a whitetail, but definitely different and has different applications. So, they are tasty either way.
So the pigs originally were domesticated and probably were tastier because of the fat, so. But, yeah, now that they're kind of lean, they're a little bit harder to make bacon out of, but
that's right.
So anyway, that's what the deer, the axis deer roar. Yeah. And also, instead of doing the blow, if you think a white-tailed deer blowing is spooky, you have not seen an axis.
Or heard one.
Or heard one, yeah, because they do this high-pitched bark that is, it's like an elk actually when an elk gets spooked, and it is, it will make you jump off your seat.
The resonance or whatever it is loud. Like you can tell they're doing it from a large chamber. Yeah. It ain't just like a meh. It's like it's got a lot behind it.
Yeah.
And then the roar is like a roar.
Yeah.
Roar. It's like sounds a lot like a seal kind of, but loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you pretty much nailed it every time you heard it. So you thought about maybe calling some in the future.
I would love to.
That'd be real cool.
So we are very intrigued by axis, if you can't tell. And I think this is kind of my observation. I won't speak for Tyler, but part of the reason is we're at the point where what we know about axis is to put the food they like out and sit by it, which is as basic of a hunting strategy as you can really have outside of maybe just like sitting on a pasture and waiting one to come by. It's very... it's kind of one of the easiest things to figure out. It's like, hey, I'm going to find the limited resource and capitalize on that. So
we could gab about whitetails all day.
Yeah.
Comes to axis, we're like, oh, maybe we should grab some hay on the way.
That's right. That's right, man. So, like, I think what's really intriguing about them is that we don't know the best way to kill these things. We don't know if you can call them in, if you can rattle them in, and there's going to be conjectures about all this stuff.
Well, this is another thing. The axis, they have like a peak rut, but they also rut year round.
Yeah.
And they have a weird like social dynamic where we saw bucks that had the smallest amount of velvet antlers. We saw halfway developed velvet antlered bucks, and we saw hardhorn, and we saw a buck that had one side from shedding.
Yeah.
And I found a shed.
We saw a hard-horned buck chasing a doe, like hot on her. So, yeah, they
sit in different stages. It's almost like, pigs, or whatever, where like they can breed at any time of year, and it's like the axes are similar, even though there are time periods when more of them are hard-horned.
They're going to have some sort of an annual schedule, though, where pigs don't really. And I think that is probably because they are tropical deer, so there's not really a natural function to keep them from breeding at one time or the other. And some of our friends that we talked to hanging out with down here talked about summer bucks, which I can only imagine implies that there are winter bucks as well. So like some deer will have hard antlers in the winter, some will have hard antlers in the summer. And so you'll see like bachelor groups right now, and you also see single bucks kind of following does around and stuff.
Yeah.
And so that also limits where they can live. That's why you don't have axis like in Michigan, right? Because they can't handle.
They gotta
the
have
winters.
warm climate.
Yeah, they gotta have warm climate. So that's why they're down here in Texas. But it kind of makes for a unique thing, and almost like a little bit of a sad thing, to where not only like in whitetail, when you're hunting and a mature buck walks by, he's going to have a nice set of antlers most likely, and it makes you excited. In axis hunting, when a mature buck walks by, he's liable to have a 1-inch knobby out the top of his head.
Yeah. And it's as big around as a daggum softball,
exactly.
Whenever you're like, oh, that was... It was like a month ago when he was a giant,
Yeah. So they're kind of strange in that way. But it's just another unique thing about them that we're trying to learn and pinpoint possibly when we could expand our strategies on these things. Tyler, do you have some thoughts on how to do that?
I do. I have some thoughts, and you do too.
You saw potentially. Okay, here's the thing, guys. We didn't have a lot of encounters with hard-horned bucks to learn a ton. But I think you saw a little bit more from the stand than I did on that front.
I saw. Well, I don't know if I saw hardhorn. I mean, I guess
you're not sure he was.
I saw. Oh yeah. No, I'm not sure actually that buck was hardhorn. The one I saw yesterday morning. I did see a bachelor group of 5 that I should have killed them. Something happened on the property north of me and spooked them. But they were heading to us. By the way, I think we're going to be able to turn this into, spoiler alert, we didn't actually kill an axis. But I think we're going to be able to turn this into a video because we had some really close encounters, and you'll be able to probably see this on the elements.
They're dead cool.
They are cool.
You should watch the video.
Definitely. I mean, there's footage of quite a few axes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, but I did see some bucks doing some different things, and I saw quite a few does as well. I would almost venture, and these whitetail were pretty spooky, but I would almost venture to say that it seemed like, at least at this time of year, that the axis might be a little bit spookier than the whitetail.
To me, that was for sure the case.
Yeah.
I mean, hill country whitetail, Texas deer, like they're going to be jumpy son of a guns either way.
Yeah.
It's just the way they are because they're kind of jackrabbits. Like a coyote has a hard time taking down a deer in Minnesota, but a full-grown coyote can eat every deer he wants to in Texas.
Yeah.
So they just have more natural predators, therefore they're just more jumpy. So the first morning we're hunting. We don't know if we're going to see an axis on this trip because this is just a permission deal. We don't know how many are on there. We did see a couple driving around whenever we were kind of scouting.
That's
so
encouraging.
We kind of had, some thoughts about maybe there'll be some around. Well, in the first fleeting moments of shooting light, I have 2 come by, and I'm like, oh, I better be trying to shoot this thing because this might be the only ones I see. Well, I reach up to turn on my GoPro, and there's an axis deer at 30 yards away, and like the most she could have heard was my sleeve like touching the bark. She comes out of her skin and runs off. So, yeah, that's when I learned, oh, man, these things are jumpy. And that continued to be the case throughout the week. That's the same thing I saw over and over again. Now, I think that between my experience last year and this year, the bucks might be a little more relaxed than the does are. And that's kind of how it works with whitetail, too, most of the time. I mean, you can't get away with anything on any of them. But in general, bucks feel a little bit more confident than does do, it would seem.
Our good friend Jesse Griffiths, who hunts a lot of axis, which he's a chef, so, that tells you something about the axis. He seems to think, too, that axis are just spooky suckers, And I feel like when people say that, it's kind of like saying, I hunt deer, but this, what I mean? These axis are jumpy. So,
which makes them very challenging bow hunting critters, and that's cool.
Yep, for sure. And they are, they will jump a string.
Yes.
They, we've talked about this before a lot, but the 30-yard shot on a whitetail is about as dangerous as it gets for string jumping.
Yeah, and apparently 32 is on an axis. So those ones that came in on me early that first morning, that second one actually spooked. Because here's the long story short here, as Tyler likes to say, which just means
I just say it because Mark Kenyon says it. Yeah. But he doesn't actually turn the story any shorter, right?
So those 2 came in. I thought they were whitetails because it's so dark. And then, so by the way, there's no illegal shooting time on axis. You can go out there with a thermal and shoot them in the head at night with a rifle if you want to. We like to shoot stuff with bows, so that's what we're trying to do. So you got to wait till you can see your pins at least to shoot them. Well, this doe walks by at 15 yards, and then I can finally tell it has white spots. I'm like, oh gosh, I need to shoot this thing. So I'm trying to shoot them. And that one freaks out and runs off. Well, the other one is like, where'd my friend go? So she starts walking weird back where she came from and walks out to like 28, is looking around. I don't have a shot there. And then she takes a couple more steps, and I give her a meh like that to stop her. Well, dude, 32 macked is like as bad as it gets. This is as bad as it gets, okay?
Yeah.
And there's zero wind. It's dead calm.
Dude, the whole trip.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind, y'all.
It is really, really calm. So I shoot. I'm not shooting a slow setup, and I'm not shooting a fast setup either. I'm like in the low 260s, which makes my bow a little quieter. So that's a whole other podcast. But
it don't matter.
It don't matter.
She heard your sleeve
she
turn the GoPro on.
Everything happened. Okay?
I mean, yeah.
She, by the time my arrow got there, she had ducked and whirled, and I shaved hair.
Yeah.
And I aimed at the bottom of her belly behind the leg. So I actually aimed almost off the deer. Like where I aimed, you wouldn't have killed her if you hit there. You might not even hit her.
Yeah.
So that's how much she moved in that amount of time. And then I learned maybe don't even take that shot because it's going to be really low odds of success, and maybe you have a better shot later or something or whatever.
Dude, we were close to killing deer on this trip. A lot of times.
20 minutes later, I passed some does because I was hoping there's a buck behind them.
Yeah.
That's how dumb I am.
A bunch of does coming through. I mean, you're having a heck of a hunt the first morning, you know? So,
well,
I mean.
That's the thing. I went from like, we might not see any deer, so I better shoot at this one when it's real tough, to like, oh, they're going to come by like this every hunt, so I can be a little picky. Well, that wasn't the case.
No, but there was several times, I mean, I felt like I was in the game a lot.
Yeah.
There was several times that we I know, when you're seeing them within 100 yards and you're trying to make moves on them, I was having a blast, dude. And I legit, with the better winds, and this is no lie, we had terrible winds. I mean, like, winds that didn't really hunt, for me and Chris especially, the places we hunted, the winds were not good most of the time. and the winds were like 1 to 2 miles an hour a lot. We had some terrible, just absolute quiet woods. Can't move your head without like feeling like a deer's gonna either see you or hear you from 30 yards.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was one of the biggest struggles. Otherwise, I do think if we'd had some decent winds, decent wind speeds, especially, we would have been able to kill.
Yeah.
I mean, I had so much swirling going on where I was at. Like, if I could have just banked on a wind to be somewhat consistent, then I could have put myself in the right tree just off and killed. But I couldn't, because we literally this morning we sat on the ground and had everything from a very much southeast to a straight west.
Also think that hunting these things out of a tree is the way to go.
Oh, yeah.
I think they are too keen to be, not to be killed, but if you want a higher odds of success, be in a tree.
Well, and one thing I noticed hunting on the ground is this property is an awesome property and has some really good native grasses that are tall. Dude, you want to talk about make an arrow go haywire and you didn't even know there was anything in the way. So we had some whitetails come through at 35 last night. Barely could even see them for most of the whole way through, man.
Where we were sitting, we could overlook a pasture of good grass, and when the whitetail walked across that pasture, all you could see was a head.
It's wild,
and
dude.
And there was times when axis or whitetail would just disappear.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm with you on that. The tree thing is the way to go. I didn't want to be on the ground, but with the winds being so weird, that's where we ended up.
And when you don't know much about a property, Greg and I got in this situation. We talked about it. If you are on the ground and you're just like, oh, man, if I was 80 yards over there, I'd be in the game. You can do that. Whereas, like, if you're in a tree in a saddle, then you're kind of like, not that you couldn't move, but there's a lot more commitment to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I just, I don't know. I felt like the whole time the wind was giving me fits a little bit. I don't think the axis ever found my hay bale too much where I was at because we hunted it a couple times and didn't see anything really moving to it. Last night we were on the ground and saw two does actually moving towards it, but we were hunting off of it, and they ended up spooking. But for what, I don't know what reason, they weren't looking at us. I think there was whitetails maybe eating over there, they spooked, man.
We had a doe come into the hay bale. So here's another thing on this side note from the side note of the side note here. These deer are not used to being baited with hay, I don't think. So it's going to take them a little while to learn that, and they were finally learning it, I think, yesterday to come to this stuff. So there's that. Whereas, like, you hunt a place that's, like, been baited for 2 weeks, they're going to know, like, I'm going to eat that for sure. But we had a deer come in by herself, like, axis doe, I'm about to smoke, and I'm kind of, like, trying to coordinate with Greg when he's got footage of it, because guess what, guys? We film our stuff. That's why you like it, so don't get, oh, you didn't shoot him. Anyways, I'm at full draw. Everything's quiet. Nothing is wrong. Wind is good. And then she just decides to flip out. Like, just made her mind up that she's going to freak out and run off for no reason. Wasn't looking at us or nothing. I had a tree between me and her.
That's a doe thing, man.
Yeah. So they just kind of have this nature about them to just be spooky.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if it's because of the tigers they deal with in India or what.
Yeah.
No, it's
exactly what it is.
You think that's
I think it's a big part of it.
I mean, I kind of feel like it could be too, man. It's like that's an innate thing. That's why the species has survived, and existed. It's because they don't get eaten by tigers all the time. The dodo bird didn't last too long. You know what I mean?
You whack them in the head with a stick, they ain't gonna last.
But some of the things that, like, I would probably do different next time. For one, I would. So where I ended up hunting, I think was an okay spot. But we made every move we made. I felt good about, and we made it because of what we were observing. Right. What we observe. What is this clown doing? What we observe is, potentially a pattern, or sometimes it may be an anomaly, and so. what we observed the first evening is we're driving down the road, and this is like a middle of nowhere county road with our property on both sides of it, right?
Yeah.
We're driving down the road, and two axes go shooting across. One's a tiny little buck. The other one might have been like a little 6-month-old buck. And they shoot across the road in the spot, and me and KC says, well, that's where they're going. That's security right there. And I don't doubt it that it was, and I decided that was correct. And now looking at it, I think that there was something they heard us coming down the county road or whatever, and they went to a different spot than they would have if they were naturally crossing.
I think that it might have been opposite of that. They were leaving security, and they just went ahead and got on their horse and got on to where they were trying to go.
Yeah, that's potentially something too. And so we ended up putting a hay bale right where they went left to, go or whatever, and then went across the creek next to the road. And so I was like, well, this is going to be good. I drew. We did a rock paper scissors the next morning for who wanted to choose their spot, and I chose that spot because we saw axis there. I was like, oh heck yeah, let's do this, man. They're going to be hanging out right in there. There's some good trails. There's an alfalfa block there. I go in there and see a bunch of whitetails, see some axis the first morning, but I saw two groups of axis cross like 120 yards from there. And basically from then on, every axis that I saw crossed in that same area. And I just wonder if the truck just spooked them into a place they don't always go. They maybe wanted to go somewhere, but the truck kind of caught them off guard or something like that. We actually had a little bit of wind, I think, the first day we got there because a front had just rolled in and was pushing out. And so maybe they didn't hear us coming down the county road very well or something. Anyway, I think that I could sit there for 5 days and probably shoot an axis, but I know that if I sat where I ended up 2 days in a row on a good wind, I would for sure shoot one, like a doe, you know what I mean, at least. So it was kind of like all my moves were just, like we always do. We make hard decisions on the daily, on the hourly sometimes to try to put ourselves in a better position that afternoon or that next morning. And sometimes you just don't, what you see is actually the anomaly and it's not the norm.
Well, that was my case where I hunted. You drew first straw, first choice, or whatever, rock, paper, scissors, and I got second. And my spot ended up being better that first morning, but I think that was somewhat the anomaly. It's not a bad spot by any means, but it was just where they were that day. And then I continued to just kind of have this same ho-hum. Not ho-hum. What am I trying to say?
You almost killed a doe the next day, though, didn't you?
I did, but she was the only axis we saw.
Yeah.
By herself. So it wasn't like just killer spot where this is, the zoo doors are open over here. It just kind of seemed that way the first morning.
Yeah.
But that's the thing with, we don't really know everything about these critters. I do think, so the first morning we had a north wind. And that's the only north wind I hunted on that property.
Yep.
And I saw a bunch of deer. And I kind of wonder if there's something to that. And it's hard to tell without a ton of
inputs.
Research. We didn't leave any cameras on this place or anything. We don't know when we'll be back, so we don't know too much about it. But at least I did see that the morning we had north winds, we saw more axis, and then we hunted some south winds there and didn't see a ton. So maybe there's something to it. But, it's almost like there's no killer spots with these things. They're just, you're on a property.
They roam a little more, maybe.
They do. There's still, bad spots, I think. You don't want to hunt the top of the hill where there's just cedars and you can't see, But, I think,
it's
you
like
can key in on that roaming thing.
If you take a whitetail and a pig and kind of mix some of the different habits, you kind of get that.
They are small spotted elk. I think they are a lot like elk, man.
They kind of have harems.
Yeah, they'll go a couple days over here, and they'll go spend a couple days over there.
Yeah, they're real nomadic.
Yeah,
that's kind of the pig aspect I was talking about. Is they'll be here for a little bit, and then they'll be over there, and you just can't really pattern them too well sometimes, and they also I think will spend time in the open a little more than a whitetail will.
They do. I see. This is a thing that I think that they really do that I'm trying to learn. You're so used to hunting whitetail, right? So you just find the thickest stuff that you can still hunt, and that's a good spot to hunt whitetails often. Axis tend to like almost bed in some thick stuff, but want to be able to get out in the open really quick and then walk through the open because they're more grazers than whitetail are. Like, how many times did we see deer just eating the dukest grass that exists?
The 5 bucks that I had coming on the other low fence property, the 5 bucks that I had coming towards me, dude, they came out in this corner, and I'm hunting like probably 120 yards from a wheat field, from the corner, and I'm hunting on a tree line, and they come out in like, think of the field as going like kind of north and south, this opening, and then there's a wheat field, and they kind of think of it as the southwest corner, and they come out in the northeast corner of this open field that's just duke grass, like you said. And they go along kind of the north fence line. They're kind of working their way towards me, especially this one big bull was working towards me. And they get out in the very middle of this like duke grass pasture that's like at least 200 yards wide.
A DGP?
Yeah. Yeah. And they just start grazing in this DGP, you know? And like, they're just, I don't know what they're eating. It looks like a mowed road ditch, you know, that's just dead grass, like dead coastal Bermuda or something. And they're just grazing it like cattle. I mean, like to the point that they just stopped in the middle and ate for 15 minutes and hardly moved at all. And I'm sitting here thinking,
we saw them
like,
do the same thing.
Please.
Greg and I were just like trying to like make moves on this group, and they just did little tiny figure 8s for 20 minutes in the middle of something that you're like, there ain't no way there's anything to eat there.
Yeah. I mean, with rifles, we could have killed some axes real easy.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't,
Not like, I'm not necessarily saying like a big buck or anything, but we could have killed some stuff.
And I know that you're not trying to do this, but just to say it, like, I'm not trying to complain, like,
no.
rifle hunters have it easy. It's just the fact of it.
Yeah.
And we choose to put that limit on ourselves in this situation, and we're fine with it.
Dude, it's fun, dude.
It is cool. I like being close to stuff.
Me too, dude. I like holding my breath for long periods of time. Just losing brain cells. No, but you know, I do. I guess what I'm saying is the video is worth watching because there is footage. They just didn't quite get to bow range. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If we'd have been gun hunting, we could have definitely put something, you know, put a kill on the video for you, but for the guys that are bloodthirsty or whatever. But that's not me. I love going out and just nature walking with my bow.
It's perfect.
So yeah. Anyway, the DGPs are probably a good area to check if you're wanting to. I think a pop-up blind would be sick, dude.
I mean,
just go out in the middle of that DGP with a pop-up blind, put a bunch of dead grass on top of it, and then just when they're not looking, just pop up and shoot them.
Chris and I did that. Oh, you mean like a waterfowl?
Yeah,
blind.
What do they call them? Layout blinds.
Layout blind.
Yeah, layout blind.
Yeah,
not
that would be
pop-up.
cool.
A layout would be awesome, dude. Like, what if you had buckshot? And so when they take off running, you just fold them up, dude, with buckshot. That'd be sick.
That
dude.
would be sick.
I might have to do that. Y'all don't take that idea.
Oh man, sorry, I kind of got some indigestion stuff going on
it's
here.
all good, dude.
Getting old, man.
That's all right, man.
So
not as old as me.
What is the tactic that kills axis? Like, is it I feel like it's observation. For us right now, like we have to watch and learn and make moves. And Greg and I say Greg and I because I bounce ideas off of Greg all the time when we're hunting.
He's a good hunter.
He's a good hunter. And he's getting pretty spiffy with the camera, too, these days.
He is. He's been nailing some footage.
But we tried the sit it out and wait on it to work, and we kind of ran out of time.
Yeah.
I think we were in a good spot, and it was worth doing. And so I've kind of had this thing going on where it's like some other people we know where when you think you might have the best spot, you don't want to hop around and burn a couple others because then you're kind of like getting a little greedy.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
like,
sure.
So I'm like, well, I'll just stay over here and it's a good spot and I'll let Tyler and Chris make some moves and stuff. And I think that this evening we could be there and possibly killing a deer and maybe a buck. Because if I sat there a week, a good buck could walk by.
Yeah.
So
I didn't move more than 100 yards, but my movements mattered because I legit if I'd have been sitting there yesterday morning, I would have killed a buck.
Yeah.
You know, if I make a good shot. And and then last night we sat there and we didn't actually have, we had whitetails do what we need them to. We didn't have access to do it. But then this morning I felt really good about it again, and we legit should have killed, but the wind was so and this was where it got to, where it was like, last day, I'm just going to hunt a bad wind. You know, I mean, it's not like, who knows what it is, but it's not great because it's southerly and it's just wafting all over the place. And, you know, lo and behold, we had Axis bark at us like within 50 yards at like 7:30 this morning. I'm talking, I legit Elon Musk rocket fueled out of my shoes this morning when that happened.
Y'all can't tell, every time I laugh, I cough. And Tyler texted me that, and I was laughing in the stand, and then I was coughing in the stand. So it wasn't a good combination.
Yeah, but I mean, my point is, like, I made the right moves. It wasn't that far, but it was it's those micro moves that we talk about. And that's where I got to. When I got to the point of I moved 100 yards, then it became like 10 yards can make the difference here. And if I'd have sat in a tree that I really wanted to sit in, if they came down the main trail, it was going to be a long shot. But where this Axis was, when it blew, I was fixing to shoot about probably 30 or under.
Dang.
If he'd have come out. And I was probably 10 yards difference, and there's a high chance that my wind barely misses the sucker. So I was pretty just, you know, it's just that's the difference a lot of times. And
I was about to the point where I was ready to, like, surrender my good spot to go try another spot. Like, if we were there another day and none of y'all claimed that boundary that we talked about as like the spot you wanted to go the next morning, I would probably be like, hey, if somebody wants to hunt my spot, I'm going to go over there.
Yeah.
Because we saw enough consistent movement for a couple days, actually. Because that's where old Half Rack came out with his buddies the first morning. The same spot, the same area, and they're crossing right there. So, like, it's the thing to do right now is to just watch and learn and make moves on.
Yeah.
So from there on, it's like, okay, how do we do that, but also manipulate the behavior of these things? One thing I did is I went over, so where I was hunting, there was a couple trails. Like, these Axis went through this big thicket, and then it necked down, and they would, like, have to kind of go through a catty corner to get to the next thicket, and that's where I was hunting. Well, one of those trails led them on to the adjoining property. So I went over there and found me a big old oak log and kind of put it across that trail. That way it would direct them over to me a little bit more. It didn't work yet, but maybe that'll stay there for a while, and sooner or later they'll adjust their movements around that, and it'll work. So, like, there's those little type micro moves or whatever that you can do, but also this is where I'm going to crowdsource. If you are listening and you're an Axis hunter and you have some experience at this, I want to learn about calling these things and about messing with them, and if it's really effective and how you have had success doing it. So if you got any ideas or thoughts on that, send us a message.
Also, if you might, like, by chance have a place that there's a bunch of Axis on and you want us to hunt it, I ain't opposed to a message.
And you might need a couple new pieces of First Light gear or something. We can work something out, you know what I'm saying? But
I got some used stuff at least.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You don't want air Q stuff, but our used stuff is pretty good.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Ours doesn't have all the barbed wire tears in it.
No tape, no brown stains, none of that stuff.
Whoa. He's on a carnivore diet.
That's right. Carnivore. Dang. So I want to know if you can bark at these things or if you can roar at these things and have them come mess with you.
Yeah.
I don't think that you could spot and stalk an Axis deer.
Yeah, they see well, man.
They do, dude. They perceive so, and there's usually a lot of eyes.
Yeah. You know what? I think that they're extra. So the bulls especially have like a wide head, but they have like wider heads than whitetails. I feel like it gives them an extra perspective.
They got like a pit bull type head about them, you know.
And that like the distance in the eyes gives them like a better depth perception. I bet you, man.
Dude, I don't know, but they are keen.
They are
keen for sure, and they're a lot of fun. I'm very glad that we got to go do this.
Me too, man. I'm
thankful for gracious people who.
Me too, man.
Like, dude, the ask is hard,
Dude,
you know?
One of the guys we were hanging with, you were like, I don't understand why y'all are doing this. Like, why are y'all helping
well, you
us?
get to know somebody for a while. You can kind of ask them some questions like, hey, man, you and these other people are really helpful. Why is that? And he kind of implied that he appreciated that we put stuff on film and kind of, and I'm not trying to toot our own horn by any means. This is what the guy said. And kind of anything to help promote, youth into hunting that he was all about. And it's not like that's our emphasis. We're not like, the Take a Kid Hunting Foundation or anything. But at the same time, we try to make things family friendly and make it fun. And that's what attracts the younger generations, like. The lone wolf mentality of like, this is terrible and I do it because I hate myself is not very appealing to Gen Z,
No.
So, having fun and going hunting.
Even Liver King makes it look fun.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
He is fun.
He
was. So I don't know if y'all know.
I mean,
this.
dude, even if you were doing it all natty, it wouldn't be that fun.
That's right. Liver King has gone all natty. And also anti-seed oil, and was at the Chick-fil-A drive-thru the other day talking to people about seed oils.
Let's go.
Because he was like, what else can I do that's SEO optimized right now?
He's not dumb, I'll say
dude.
that.
He's a good businessman for sure.
He is, man. He's a different shade of tan, too.
Of orange. Yeah. Oh, man.
Him and old Donald been hanging out a little bit, I think.
Yeah. How are you going to kill your first axis deer, Tyler?
With a bow.
That's good.
I don't know that, actually, but I would like to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say this. I found a shed, like I mentioned earlier, probably to the half-rack buck you saw. It's cool, man. It's heavy, like it's fresh. But he's not like a monster, but he's a nice buck. And if I shot that deer with a bow, especially on just like a free-range, kind of do-it-yourself deal, man, would I just be like on cloud nine, man. Mm-hmm. That would be so cool. But my first axis, if I'm going to give you a quick little setup, okay, here's my ideal. I would be in a live oak tree, and I would be able to shoot out from it so it's not too gnarly and droop down on the ends with the limbs. I would have some shots from a live oak tree, and I would like to shoot that axis at about 26 yards, broadside, using a trail, because they are fairly nomadic, it seems like, a little bit.
A little habitual, too.
They will, and habitual, I think they definitely, like, when they go somewhere, they go, And so
it's a good thing about axes is they move around.
Yeah. And I would like to think I would be shooting one that's going between pieces of thick cover.
Mm-hmm. Sounds pretty good to
Probably
me.
going back to bedding or vice versa.
I'm going to shoot my first one on a frontal when I roar him in.
Oh, baby.
I don't know about that. That sounds, if you talk about ideals, that sounds like ideal to me.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I hope to do it soon, man. It's a neat deal, and we're blessed to have the opportunity to go do that, and we're very thankful to those who have helped us with that. One of those guys being our buddy Jesse Griffiths, he sent us a couple different ways to kind of maybe get some help. He's not going to do that for you, but he does, in fact, do something called the New School of Traditional Cookery, where he does these classes where you do get to go on a hunt and kill something, and he'll help you butcher and cook and learn how to prepare the wild game. Really neat deal. So if you want some of Jesse's help, that would be a cool thing to do. Go buy the Hog Book, because they've got some awesome recipes and cool things in there as well. Mm-hmm. We'd love to support our buddy Jesse. Go to
just a kind guy, man. Yeah. He's like just a super dude and a great chef, and very helpful. And also in the same way that we got kind of the nod towards helping kind of portray hunting correctly, he does a really good job of that, man.
Yeah.
So
good representative, man. You've got to be bros with. So remember to be a good bro yourself, okay? If you know somebody who might need a little guidance out in the woods, help them out. Don't give them your spot, because and then you might not have a good spot. But, help them out. Give them number 2 or whatever. Yeah. It's always good to.
Eric does lots of number 2s.
He does. Dang it. Golly. It's always good to try to, here's the deal, man.
Yeah,
it's like
this.
There's a real cheesy way to present things. Like, we need to do this certain way, and there's this formula to make sure hunting keeps going. But honestly, if you just pour your heart into something and act out of the kindness that is within you, then it's going to work out a whole lot better than if you, try to do things for social media attention.
Passion creates passion,
yeah,
man.
that's it, man. Just show people what you care about, and
right.
the people you care about, show them what you care about, and it's going to work out just fine.
Yeah.
So remember to be passionate about the right things.
That's right.
And remember, this is your element.
Live in it.